Hi everybody. So I'm going to create a little video to help you sort of organize the work we've been doing up until this point and to ask you to review some of the work that you've done. So if you've been keeping track of your scores in StudentView and Schoology, you'll see that you're earning credit for some of the work that we're doing. But and in some cases the credit is tied to the quality of the work you did, but in other cases it's just tied to the fact that you did the work. Now, all of the work that I'm asking you to do, though, relates to skills that will be summatively assessed. So what I'd like to do today, and one of the main goals of this week, is to go back over the work you've produced and look at the feedback I've given you, or listen to my feedback now and compare it to your answers. Um, this is really important for you to go back and do, because as we go forward, I'm going to just start asking you to apply stuff we did in the first couple weeks. But if you aren't applying it the way a bioethicist would apply it, I'm not going to be able to give you credit for it when it comes to an assessment that's for credit based upon, giving a well-reasoned argument. So we're going to start back at lesson 1 on the topic of values. The first thing I want you to notice or look at is the values in bioethics background notes. Now, you didn't submit this one. I just want to highlight this for you. What I think you need to do, if you have not already opened this in your Google Drive, is to make a copy of this in a folder on bioethics so that you can reference this particular activity. The notes on values, and then major bioethical approaches, and then this week's notes on stakeholders, those should be arranged somewhere where you can go back and find those to use as a reference. The main thing here on this note sheet is that you are using the correct values that are common to bioethics. In all the case studies I'm going to give you, and the case study you're ultimately going to design in this class, you need to be able to show the common bioethical values. So I'm looking that you're using these terms, okay, when I assess it, that you're talking about these values and that you're defining them appropriately. If you're not referencing this sheet, or you don't already have this stuff memorized and you're using just kind of your own ideas about values, you're going to start to lose some credit in some of the assessments that we have going forward. So you'll want this organized. So first thing, pause, organize this. Did you pause? Are you paused? Okay, we're going to go back. The next thing that I asked you to do was to do a case study on vaccinations and values. Okay, I paused you for a second there while I got the document open. This one you did need to create a submission. Now, you submitted your answers here, but what I assessed was the discussion post. So if you look in Schoology, you will see these discussion posts, group A, B, C, D, E. And in the assignment on the case study, it asked you to make 2 discussion posts. So if in Schoology you only earned a 2 on the case study vaccinations and values, it's because you only posted once to the discussion and you needed to post twice. The first discussion was your ideas about who to save. The second discussion, you'll see here, this task 3, was to go and read other people's discussions and respond to one person who you disagreed with someone they saved and why you disagreed with it. So please go and check your discussion post scores right now. And if you have a 2 and you'd like to earn 4, you can still go back and do that second response, but you would need to let me know that you have gone in and done that. All right, so pause. Okay. Now, the last thing that we had was this assessment on the values in bioethics. Paused you for a second while I opened up this link. This was the prompt, or what you needed to do. So you needed to list 2 people that you would save from the case study on vaccines, and then you needed to apply one of the major bioethical values to why you saved them. So you had to go back to this document and actually look, oops, sorry, not this document. No. sorry, back to the document. I have closed it. Back to the document on the major bioethical values, the one I just asked you to save. Um, and you had to create a submission where you identified the person you wanted to save and then the value you were applying and how saving them met that value. So the criteria you were judged on was this, that you correctly identified a bioethical value and then you justified your argument. So I'd like everybody to go in now and look at your score. I recorded some feedback for some of you to consider. Okay, so open yours up and look and see if I gave you feedback. Look and see how you earn points on this scale to figure out what you need to work on when it comes to identifying values, because we're going to be assessing on that again. Okay, so I'm going to pause. Please pause and go and look at your scores on that right now. Pause. Okay. Okay, now that you've gone and reviewed your work on how to identify values and you've thought about, well, did I really use the common bioethical values or was I just using my own values? Going forward for this class, I want you to use the apply the common bioethical values. So then the next unit, last week's work, was all about the major bioethical approaches. So we have values that underlie our moral decisions, and then we have these approaches to bioethics. And you did this activity on the moral machine, by the way. I loved reading your answers on who you saved and why you saved them. They were really well thought out and interesting, and I appreciate the reflection you guys did on that. There was another background reading on morals, ethics, and taking action. So if you could open that up and let's look at that. Okay, so hopefully you've opened this document and we're going to review it right now. If you submitted this and you completed all of the questions, you earned a 4, but it doesn't necessarily mean that your answers kind of matched the level of detail that I'd like. So let's look at what we had. So in here we had some information about what morals and ethics are and how they're different from values. And then I introduced you to sort of these 3 main approaches to bioethics, ways we approach making decisions in bioethics, maximizing benefits, minimizing harms, and justice. And I reviewed that in that video, so if you want to listen to that again, you can here. And then I gave you an example problem. And I said, here we have an ethical statement. We should give the vaccine to the doctor. What is the action in the ethical statement? The action is giving the doctor. What is the ethical decision? Or what is the value, and then what is the ethical decision? Now, many of you earned credit for doing this assignment, but did not do a very, well, you applied your own thinking, not the bioethical approaches to your answers. So let's review these. In example 1 and 2, I gave the same answer. So give a vaccination to the 2-year-old who lost their parents, but I gave different arguments for why they were giving it to the 2-year-old. These came from students, so I didn't make these up. One student said to give the vaccine to the 2-year-old because they'd already lost their parents and they'd lost so much, so they deserve to be treated special. The action is give the vaccine to the 2-year-old. Everybody did well on that. Some of you struggled in identifying the value, and I think that's because you didn't go back to your notes from week 1 and look for those common values within bioethics. I wanted a bioethical value here, not just your own feelings about what was being valued. So in this case, we're valuing equity, right? That people get what they need based upon what they already have. The approach to the bioethical decision is, or the major bioethical approach then, if you go back up here, is an approach of justice, right? It's not about respecting persons or maximizing benefits and minimizing harms. Now, some of you might be like, well, but what if, I mean, I saved the 2-year-old because they live for a long time. Well, all right, fine. That's example number 2. Some of you didn't answer number 2 because you were like, oh, it's the same thing. It's not. Look at the second sentence. The person that saved the 2-year-old, another person, said they saved them because they were young and we needed to protect them for their whole life, which means that the action was the same, but the value and the bioethical decision were different. So what were they valuing? We're valuing length of life that a person has to live. Not quality, because we have no idea what the quality of life of a 2-year-old is going to be, but we're valuing the length of their life. Now, the bioethical approach to that decision is not about justice. even if you feel like it should be about justice, in this case, if you're doing it because of how long they have to live, then you're taking the bioethical approach of maximizing benefits. You're trying to give them the maximum number of years of life. Okay. In example number 3, again, we're saving the mother who refused treatment, but you got to read why. We're giving it to her because if she's willing to give up her spot, then she's just looking out for them, even if it means it will hurt her. We should do what she asks and let her protect her own son, right? So we're doing what she asks. So what's the action? Vaccinate the son of this mother. What's the value? We're valuing respect, right? And autonomy, right? And so we're valuing a person's autonomy, their right to make decisions about what happens to them. And then what's the approach? The bioethical approach, then, if you go back up here, in this case, we're valuing respect for persons. We're respecting her right as an individual to make a choice about what happens, right? And then finally, in question number 4, I give you a scenario where 2 people come into the hospital and want the vaccine. One person is not given the vaccine. The other person is. And I'm asking you to compare and contrast bioethical approaches. And so in this case, again, you need to reference up here. When we give it to the nurse, why? What bioethical approach is that? Well, they're giving it to her because of the services she can provide. That's maximizing benefits. We are ignoring the elderly person's request for a vaccine, even though they're asking for it, which means we're ignoring a person's bioethical right to have respect for them as a person. We're saying, no, your bioethical right to make your own decisions about your own body is not as important as the needs of our community and the needs that the services this person can provide. Okay. Now, you've reviewed this document. You've looked at how you compared the values and bioethical approaches to what I just talked about. Okay. Save this document in the same folder you saved your values notes, because this has the information on how we make bioethical decisions, what those major approaches are. This week, there's going to be another assessment that is summative. It's going to be your second attempt at identifying values. So if you do better than you did the first time at identifying values using the same rubric, your score is going to go up. I see that as a skill. I don't expect everybody to be great at identifying values the first time. So let's say the first time you identified values, you kind of struggled. You didn't know what the major ones were. You weren't using the sheet, whatever. And this time you go use the sheet and everything looks great. So the first time you get a 2, and this time you get a 4. The 2 goes away. Now you got a 4. And I expect you to keep writing like that for the rest of the trimester. Same goes for major bioethical approaches. If you are not able to, sorry, I was just waving my daughter away there. If you did not use the major bioethical approaches in this activity, okay, recognize that this week will be my first assessment of applying bioethical approaches. And I'm going to be looking to see that you can do that using these key bioethical approaches. Okay. As always, I know this was a long video, but that's why there's sort of less work this week, because I really want you to go through and review these. If you've just been listening to me and you haven't been reviewing the documents, go back through all the documents that you've done. Look at my feedback. Read what you wrote and compare it to what I just talked about. And be prepared to use this information going forward. All right. If you have questions about your grade or about how scores are processed or about how to answer some of these questions, please message me or visit me during my office hours. And yeah, good luck, everybody.